that in all of the challenges in my life, there's one common denominator. You know what it is? This guy right here. All my challenges, all my problems, all my issues, the one common denominator in all of them is me. And I bet if you look at the problems that you're struggling with in your life, you're going to find you're the problem you're trying to solve. That's what we're going to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned.
He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPowerAcademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training. Subscribe now.
Always wanted to level up communication skills but hate rigid schedules? Story Power Academy Self-Paced is the answer. Dive into courses whenever, wherever, like a Netflix binge for personal growth. Packed with raw techniques and storytelling magic, it's like upgrading from a flip phone to a smartphone in leadership skills. Join the Academy now and transform your communication game.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I know that through the course of my life there have been some really ridiculous things, problems that I look at, I couldn't figure out how they kept happening. The really scary ones are the ones that they happen over and over and over again. My mom used to say, sometimes, son, you've got an alligator mouth and a canary backside. Don't let your alligator mouth overload your canary backside. It took me years to figure out what they meant. That was almost as complicated as keep your eye on the ball. I'm not sure that I ever really got my hands around that one. Keep your eye on the ball. What do you mean by that? Am I supposed to stare at it the whole time? Well, technically, yeah. In fact, as I got older, I heard batting coaches who would say, don't just look at the ball. Certainly don't look at the pitcher. If you're watching the pitcher, you're already too late. If his arm has come over the top, you're already too late. But you should be staring at the stitches on the ball. As the snipers would say, aim small, miss small. See, the challenge for many of us, and for me included, was it's really easy to look at all of the challenges of life and say, well, everybody else caused this or that or this or the other. It's the IRS, it's my taxes, it's the bills, it's whatever else. But the truth is, if you were to dive in deep enough into that pool of accountability, especially self-accountability, what you'll find on the other side of that pool is a lot of humility. It's easy to blame a lot of other people. In fact, it's so easy to use data, statistics, surveys, to identify what someone else has done wrong so that, well, personally, you don't have to take accountability for it. I'm going to tell you another irony, though. And sometimes this starts with the story you tell yourself in the mirror. That irony is this: you can't solve other people. You can't solve other people, but you can solve you. And if the problem that keeps coming up always involves me, then I'm the problem I have to solve. Now, hear me out. Sometimes that solution might be I have to remove myself from an environment. I have to remove myself from a relationship. I have to build boundaries. Notice the common denominator in all that again. In the solution is me. I have to make choices. I have to make decisions. I have to make commitments. Watching a cop video just last night, young men, two of them together, fleeing from the cops. Finally, one forces the other one to stop, lets him out, and he jumps out off the side of the road and is just standing there as all the cops go zooming by in the pursuit. Well, they got a good enough look at him to know who he was, to be able to identify him from other events. Finally, the other guy crashes out, they get him back, and he's like, I wasn't driving. They're like, you're the only one in the car. He's like, I wasn't driving. You can't prove I was driving. Well, all those cameras would say otherwise, but I just need to know your name. This battle went back and forth. Eventually, they fingerprinted him, took him to jail. He's gotten a couple of years of crime. But the passenger who got out said, I knew the car was stolen, but I didn't want to ride in it. But you were in it for almost 2 hours. I mean, you went to all these other places before you finally got out. At what point did you decide it was a bad idea to be riding around in a stolen car with a known criminal? At first he said, I didn't even know the guy. Well, that's even sillier then. You got in the car with somebody you didn't know. You rode around for 2 hours in a stolen car with a criminal whose name you didn't know. Well, what kind of decisions are you making? But see, when you end up serving time because you decided to hang out with people who make those kind of choices, whose fault is that? Theirs for making the choices or yours for choosing to hang out with them? See, this goes back to the same problem. If the best advice you're getting is from people who haven't made it any further down the road than you have, you're no different than the guy cruising around with the criminal. If your best insights, your best self-interrogatories, if you are looking at you and interrogating yourself and asking, what could I do better? What could I spend more time on? What could I spend less time on? Who could I spend more time with? Who could I spend less time with? What should I be reading? What should I be studying? What should I be learning? You're going to find out pretty quickly that if you don't change the course that you're on, nothing in your life is going to change. But it doesn't have to be a big drastic change every single time. It's the small incremental changes. John Maxwell says something like, we all overestimate what we can do in 5 years and underestimate what we can do in a day, or something like that. Here's what he's really saying. If you just make those changes and stick to them, if you make a new decision, make a new choice, and commit to it, you can do amazing things. Most people think 5 years from now I'll make all this difference. Yeah, but nothing will happen 5 years from now if you don't start making some kind of change today. And sometimes that hardest change starts with the self-discovery of, I am the problem. I led to this problem. I was perusing through Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. And he points out, and I won't even read it to you, but he points out that in an earnest attempt to advance their thinking and figure out a solution to this scourge. The scourge was what they called the perpetual fever. In the 1800s, the perpetual fever killed like 20 to 30% of women who were giving birth. Now, ironically, prior to the hospital system, women giving birth at home, it was like 6%. Now they're going to the hospital and they're dying at a rate of 20 to 30%. That's a horrible stat. But they're trying to defend, really you're safer being in a hospital rather than a home birth. You're safer being in the care of doctors and nurses than doing this at home. In an earnest attempt to advance their thinking and figure out a solution to this scourge, it was common for the intellectually driven surgeons to perform autopsies in the morning, study the victims for clues, then attend the patients in the afternoon. Ready for this one? The idea of germs was not yet well understood, and the surgeons frequently did not properly wash their hands or sterilize their instruments. It wasn't until 1843 that American physician out of Boston, Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, he was the father of Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., the Supreme Court Justice, proposed in an essay in the New England Quarterly Journal of Medicine that doctors themselves were causing the problem, the spread of the disease. He insisted doctors had a moral obligation to purify their instruments and burn their clothing they wore for administering burn the clothing they wore when administering care to infected women. Okay, largely unnoticed, it took 12 more years before they decided, oh, so when we touch these dead, infected, diseased bodies, and then we go care for a woman who's already a little bit sick, it just expands that. And then when we go care for a woman who's giving birth, she's likely to die. Why? Well, because you just touched a dead thing and you didn't clean yourself up first. The problem the doctors had was no different than the criminal standing on the side of the road. You knew what were doing was bad. You knew you were associating with something that was going to lead in the wrong direction, and yet you just kept doing it. Now, you can apply that across any aspect of your leadership. If you've got an employee that you have a challenge with and you keep doing the same thing, you keep staying on the same path, you're not giving them an opportunity to find another job. You're not giving them the pay raise that they're trying to negotiate for. You're not giving them the training they desperately need. Then you're no different than the guy standing on the side of the road waiting to be arrested. Oh, calamity is coming. And it's your fault. And you're going to have to take responsibility for it. And so long as you can spend your time on this side of the pool, where your pride and your arrogance blames the problem on everybody else. It's that employee who won't show up on time. It's that one who won't even live out their job description. It's that one who won't follow the instructions that they're given. It's their fault. I'm not saying that's untrue. The criminal who eventually crashed the car was the criminal who originally stole the car. He was the bad guy from beginning to end. There was no question about that. But the yo-yo who got in the car with the criminal, in the stolen car, and cruised around with him for 2 hours. The calamity in his life was the result of his choices. He chose to be with the guy who stole the car. He chose to spend 2 hours with the guy. He chose to stay in the car when there was a hot pursuit going on. Everything that he got as the consequence of those choices were his consequences. They were his choices. Were they adjacent to somebody else's bad choices? Yes. Look, if you're married to them, you got a different problem. But if you're dating a narcissist and you don't have enough sense to run, the consequences of that are going to be your consequences. Regardless what this other person does. If you don't know how to build the boundaries, if you don't know how to prevent, to provide self-care, then you're no different than the doctors who refused to wash up before they went on to the next person. And over and over and over, we see it in the world of our finances. We see it in the world of our business operations. I was just talking to someone today. I said, there should be a monthly P&L. There should be a process for this. And the answer was, well, I hate doing it, so I just don't. Okay, that doesn't change the necessity. It doesn't mean the consequences of not knowing your numbers isn't going to come back to haunt you. The process is still the process. The system is still the system. The expectations are still the expectations. Whether you like them or not doesn't change them. The consequences are coming. Now the question is, can you jump off the side of the pride of the pool, dive into the accountability, and pop up on the other side where there be humility? The humility to say, you know what? It was me. I broke it. I'm responsible for fixing it. I've told this story before, but I remember I was young in the Air Force. I think it was my second duty assignment. So I was probably 22, 23 years old. And I was hanging out with this 15-year-old kid who had this really cool remote control gas-powered race car. That sucker was fast, probably 70, 80 miles an hour. It was probably 18 inches square, weighed about 45 pounds, zoomy little thing. And he was out racing it around. We were just chilling together and hanging out. And he jumped over a bump, and when it landed, it wouldn't go anymore. We took it all apart, did a little surgery on it, and found that there was a gear that had the teeth of the gear and the next step up of the gear had dislodged. It stripped out. And in our genius, both of us not thinking very further down the road than the end of our nose, we superglued that gear back in place. We waited for it to dry. We turned it back on. He fired it up, and we stripped out 6 more gears. Why? Because the primary gear was superglued to itself and the axle. It couldn't move where it was supposed to. We fixed it. Oh, we fixed it good. It was completely broke by the time we were done. Because we just didn't have the foresight to think through, what if I do this? I'm going to challenge you in your leadership roles, the relationships you have, the decisions you make, the investments you make, the expenditures you approve. How many of those do you look at in the moment? How many of those do you choose or make decisions on purely emotionally? How many of those do you look further down the road and go, if I do this, then I project this could happen. And if I do that, then I project that could happen. And that's not the road that I want to go down. See, we often look back after an employee has gone bad, after somebody has left the company, after they've created a mess with customer service, after they've not delivered on what they were supposed to, after we haven't got the results that we wanted, and we ask, what's wrong with them? But if you've hired one or two different people to do the same job and the job's still not getting done, maybe the problem you need to solve is you. Maybe it's the who that you hire and why. It's how you hire them. What is the process? Do you have a job description? I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with clients, and the first thing I ask them is, what's in the job description? And they're like, well, we didn't really have one. I mean, I know what their skills are, I know what their background is, and so, I just wanted to bring that background to the job. I'm like, well, you got two problems there. Number one, you presume that the conditions, the environment, the expectations that you provide are identical to the conditions, the environment, and the expectations they succeeded under before. I'm not sure that's true, especially if they're moving from a larger company with a lot of resources to a smaller company. This is the reality that smacks most of us in the face as entrepreneurs. I came from a company where I negotiated $13 million worth of media advertising, television buys and billboard buys and bus sides, and negotiated all kinds of trades and high-level deals. I had a cash budget to work with. I had a lot of leverage on my side for trades. I had a lot of exposure. Everybody knew the brand name. And then I stepped out on my own. And nobody knew my brand name. And nobody knew who I was. And I had no capital to work with. I had no big bank account to lay the cash aside the trade. I got nothing. Nobody knows me, and everybody wants the biggest dollars to accomplish it. And the reality sets in that all the things that you can do as an incremental part of a large organization, you've got to do all of those increments as an individual. And when you're trying to build your company back up, trying to figure out which one of those persons to put in the right slot, it's kind of like that silly little ball we played with as kids. And you see people often who have failed to master that little game. You know, the one that looks like an octagon of sorts, and you have to put the square in the square hole and the triangle in the triangle hole and the plus in the plus hole. And if you don't put them in the right hole, they just don't go in. As a kid, I used to pull the thing apart and just throw them all inside because I was too lazy until I figured out how to put it all together. But I always figured out how to pull it apart and dump the pieces out, or pull it apart and put them all inside it. I didn't always take the time patiently to put the ones in the right. See, hiring people is very much like that. Or you can open the ball up and stuff all the things inside. It's kind of like disassembling the Rubik's Cube to solve the Rubik's Cube. You don't have any better solution. You just have gotten to the end of the process. That's not the same thing. I was working with a client just yesterday, and they said, we need a new onboarding process. We need a new system. What kind of assessments do you recommend? And I said, what is it you want to know about them? Like, well, we want to know if they're going to work well. Okay. I mean, are you looking for a resume? You're looking for a review process? What are you looking for? And so I recommended my two favorites, especially for new people coming onto a team or reorganizing a team. And I said, StrengthsFinders is probably the best, in my opinion, of all the personality profiles. It really helps people see who they are deep inside. DISC is good. I like StrengthsFinders better myself. The other one that I recommend is the 6 Types of Working Genius. Love the book, love the methodology. Also appreciate the fact that it does a much more effective job for understanding how you think and what lights you up about your job. That's a different thing than your personality profile. The who that you are and the things that you like to do are not always the same. There are things that I'm really good at, and I absolutely despise them. I hate math. I'm naturally good at math. I had a 3.8 GPA in electronics engineering while taking trig and calculus, and I hate math. I can do it. I have the brain for it. I just don't like it. Don't make me math. Any more than I have to. I don't want to math. What is it I like to do? I love to learn. I just don't want to learn math. I love to study. I love to study people and the way they behave. And if you could put me in a job where studying people makes me better at my job, I'm all in. Oh, great. That's why I do what I do as a leadership coach, as a communications coach. I spend most of my time learning everybody else's tips and tricks on leadership. Some of them I agree with, and some of them I think are absolute hogwash. And I apply the good ones, and I throw out the bad ones, and sometimes I make fun of them. But when it comes to working with my clients, that learner skill set is a huge portion of what I do. I also love to wonder. That big brain thinking, always brainstorming, always looking for new ideas. And I love to innovate. And so I'm a WI on the 6 types of working genius, if you hadn't figured that out. You know what my two, I hate them? The E and the T. Yeah, that's just too much detail for me. I don't have time for that stuff. Not that I can't, I hate it. I hate the mathing part, all right? If you know when somebody walks in the door that you have a job description and then you do an analysis, whether it's strength finders or it's working geniuses, and you lay that across their job description and their resume, you may find very quickly they've been doing a job they're competent at. They've never been allowed to do the job that just lights them up and makes them the best person. And if you have a person like that who's in your workplace, on your team, who's frustrated, who's underperforming, who's not delivering on the goals, who's not meeting the expectations of their job description, oh, they show up because they're loyal, but they do work. The problem you're trying to solve is you. Because you came into this with some expectation and demand that said, I need a person to do this job. Now, whether that's what they're really good at or not is another thing. Whether that's really what they're made to or not is another thing. But your demand that that person fill this role, that could be the problem all by itself. You may be the doctor who refused to wash up and you keep wondering, why do I keep having to hire new people for that job? Well, because you're not hiring the right kind of people. And what if it's your obstinance that keeps you from moving someone who's already on your team into that role? What if it's your pride that says, well, I could do it better myself? Okay, then do it yourself. Hire somebody else to be the boss. Really? Yeah. Sometimes the question you have to ask is, who should be the boss? I mean, if I'm going to go join a choir, I'm probably not going to go in there and sing bass. I don't have the voice for it. I'm also not going to go in and sing soprano. I don't have the voice for it. But if I insisted, if I'm going to be on your team, I'm going to be a soprano. Whoever's heading up that choir is crazy for letting me stay. Because I can't do the job. I don't have the voice for that. I don't have the... Ask me to play the trumpet. Don't ask me to play that trumpet. Doesn't mean I don't love the band. I just can't play the trumpet. I know I can't play the trumpet. You telling me play the trumpet, I'll incentivize you to play the trumpet. I'll pay you more if you play the trumpet well. If you play the trumpet 7 days a week, I'll pay you even more. It doesn't matter. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the talent. I can't play trumpet. No amount of paycheck makes me a trumpet player. I hope this exaggeration is sinking in a little bit. There are leadership decisions that you have to make that you probably don't want to make. They involve people that you don't want to hurt or offend. Yeah, get over it. It's your job as the leader. And sometimes the accountability to go, yep, so-and-so messed up that job, so-and-so didn't do the customer service there, the accountants didn't get the paperwork turned in on time. And all of those problems come back to moi. Because I hired them, I empowered them, I put them in place, and they failed. I didn't properly train them. I didn't properly vet them. I didn't properly equip them. And they failed. Who's the problem? The leader. The leader is always the problem. Because if the leader recognizes there is a problem where someone else can't play trumpet, it's the leader's job to replace the trumpet player. Does it seem any more complicated than that? But I can tell you sometimes the challenge across the board is that I have to look in the mirror and say to myself, are you doing everything you can to be the very best? No, sometimes I cut corners. Sometimes I'm a little lazy. Sometimes I'm not as diligent as I could be. I'm not as hard on myself as I am on others. Yeah. As a leader, that's your responsibility. As a leader, they count on you for that. They need you to do that. As a leader, it's not your job to do every task, but it is your job to know the difference. What tasks are mine and which ones am I delegating? And to what degree? I was talking with another client recently who said, my philosophy on delegating is once I've handed it off, I never see it again. I never touch it again. Like, I mean, I can get that. That'd kind of be in an ideal dream world. But what do you do with it if that person decides they're not going to do it well? Or they decide they're not going to stay around? Or they're just not good at it? What do you do then? And they said, well, then I train somebody else to do it. Oh, well, that's kind of curious, isn't it? I mean, what do you really do with it? I have to take it back and do it myself until I can hand it off to somebody else that I train. Yeah, that's a big difference, isn't it? It's accountability. Because eventually the job's got to get done. And the excuse, I delegated that, doesn't cut it. The job has to get done, and you're the one responsible. Look, as a leader, you've got to be willing to admit sometimes the problem I'm trying to solve can't be solved by hiring and firing. It can't be solved by throwing more money at it. It can't be solved by blaming outside the organization. Sometimes the problem I'm trying to solve is right here. And if I'm not willing to solve that problem, I'm going to have to deal with the consequences. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, or Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. There is a retreat coming up that I want you to know about. It's called the Story Power Academy Retreat. This Story Power Retreat is about focusing on your communication skills, taking them to the next level. Discover, develop, draft, deploy, and deliver some of the best stories you've ever learned. You're going to listen, create, connect, relax, and reflect around this beautiful lake scene in Granbury, Texas. It's a chance to rejuvenate and refresh and start over with some of the best training you can possibly imagine around storytelling,